It's strange to realize that you exist, that you are there again. But then you took a breath, and then another. You stretched, and the cartilage of your joints cracked. My tongue is stuck to the roof of my mouth. I need to peel it off. I'm thirsty. Then you felt the eyeballs spinning under your eyelids, and then... You're remembering. You remember that you died yesterday. A horrible, disgusting death. Fractions of a second that made your nerve endings scream in horror and pain because you were literally smeared all over the capsule, turning a once healthy human body into a slurry of bloody organic matter, literally into a puree of meat, liver, bones, and waste products. Holy shit! It's disgusting to even remember. I'm literally sick of it. Or is it a natural part of the process? And now you're resurrected. Literally. You weren't there. And there was no heaven, no hell, no light, no darkness. There was nothing. The great nothingness. Do you remember what happened 100 or 200 years ago? No. Because you weren't there then. Just like you haven't been here for 10,000 years. And 100,000 years. And 1,000,000. You just weren't there. But then you take a breath, and your ribs expand under the pressure of your lungs, filling with air. You can hear your heart pounding, which just wasn't there until recently. The hormonal system is raging. Adrenaline seems to pour into your veins in liters, exciting the whole body. The capsule's lid slid open. The scream! No, it wasn't a scream. A scream of horror, anger, and hatred burst from his chest. "You bitch!" Thomas Sobieski lunged forward and grabbed Corporal Abbott by the collar of his overalls, intending to slap him in the face. But Abbott deftly dodged, and Thomas fell to the floor with a swing. However, he jumped up naked and, spraying bits of regeneration gel around him, rushed to attack again. "Stand down. This is Second Lieutenant Sattler. What the fuck is going on?" But Sobieski didn't care that he was lower in rank than Corporal Abbott. All he wanted to do was reach out with his fist to the corporal's insolent face, which right now mockingly expressed feigned childish innocence. A blow, another blow, everything goes by. Your body is still weak. Your coordination is useless. Besides, the gel makes you slide along the deck like those wolves who decided to have sex on the ice of a frozen river. "Stand down, I said." The second lieutenant grabbed Sobieski by the hair and yanked on him, and Thomas fell on his back, slipping on a piece of gel. The captain took out a handkerchief and wiped his hand. Abbott had the look of a mischievous husky dog, who doesn't seem to hide that he messed up by ripping up the couch, since it's obvious, but at the same time doesn't consider it something terrible that could be punished. "No, you nit. You won't just get away with it." "What have you done again, Corporal?" the second lieutenant shouted. Abbott snapped to attention, but somehow not very dutifully. It seemed to be his usual behavior in the presence of the commander. "Nothing like that, really, sir." Abbott was clearly messing around. "I'm asking you again. What did you do?" The lieutenant repeated the last words, pausing between each one. "Well, this..." Abbott scratched the back of his head, forgetting himself, but immediately returned to attention. Turned off the anesthesia before hyperacceleration. "Abbott, you're never going to be a lieutenant." Sattler shook his head. "You know that what you did is not in accordance with the regulations, right?" "Yes, sir, I know," the corporal rapped out. "And you knew that punishment would follow, right?" "That's right, sir." "But did you turn off anesthesia anyway, so that the novice could feel the difference between hyperacceleration with anesthesia and hyperacceleration without it. That's right, sir. Sorry, sir. Holy shit, Abbott, you're an idiot. That's right, sir. I'm an idiot, Abbott repeated, his eyes bulging. Anesthesia, anesthesia, throwing orange, getting stoned to death, taking a sip of blue, Judas injection, or conversely, the hand of God, are all names for the same process. In fact, no different from the most common death penalty by lethal injection. Only the first two are official, and all the others are already folklore of those who overcame vast outer spaces at hyperdrive. Yes, and in the case of execution, there is no need to talk about any resurrection. What is the difference between execution and injection before acceleration? Now, when you go to bed, you know you're going to wake up, right? More precisely, you don't think about the fact that you will never wake up. It's the same before hyperacceleration. You know you'll wake up when the compound spreads through your veins and you just kind of fall asleep. It's like taking a sleeping pill. And when a convict is dragged to his death, he knows that the next day will not come for him, that this is it, the end. You can't expect to wake up. During the execution, painkillers and drugs are not administered, which extinguish the fear of death, and the heart does not go into a frenzied rhythm under the influence of hormones, and you do not perceive everything that happens as an ordinary, pleasant procedure. Now, do you understand what a person feels who has had anesthesia turned off after sealing the capsule from the outside? And at the same time, we also wished you a successful flight. You frantically search for the emergency exit button in the dark, but it doesn't work, because the flight protocol has already been started, and there has been no external command to abort it, and you're waiting for the inevitable death that could come at any second. And it's coming. But you're not afraid of cosmic radiation. You are restored upon arrival at the place, and you fall under the protection of the planet's magnetic field, if it has one, of course. And if there is none, then it's not a big deal neither. Any received radiation dose will easily be written off by another resurrection, just like any other injury. The main thing is to get the head to the capsule before it starts to decompose, but this also has its own tricks. By the way, nobody cancelled the side effects either, but you always have to take some kind of risk. By the way, officially, the procedure of regeneration and recovery after hyperacceleration is called awakening. Apparently, the creators of the technology did not want unnecessary analogies with Jesus Christ and religious references in general, but, damn, it was immediately clear that they could not do without them. So almost everyone who went through hyperacceleration used the term resurrection as a matter of course. Sattler looked at Thomas, who was shaking with adrenaline. "This is your first hyperdrive, isn't it, Sobieski?" "Sir, that's right, sir." Thomas stood at attention, as much as his body, which had not yet fully reached its condition, would allow. The second lieutenant scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Abbott, you have 2 outfits out of turn." Abbott spread his hands in understanding. "Well, and you, Sobieski, happy Epiphany. And yes, don't forget that every 10,000th resurrection fails." The lieutenant winked slyly. After all, there were still many more hyper-accelerations ahead.
The ship entered orbit in standard mode without involving pilots, who, to be honest, were only happy about it, like all of us. The artificial intelligence worked as it should. After waking up, I want to come to my senses, take a shower, get dressed, and drink tea with cookies. But that's later. After you become aware of your existence. For what the hell kind of awakening? Waking up is when you stretch sweetly in the morning, Watch the first rays of the new day break through the curtains, and under you is a soft, comfortable mattress with a pillow and clean sheets. This procedure is called awakening exclusively in official documents, and officials insist that all others call this action similarly. Well, not to be confused with the resurrection, or resurrection, whichever you like. When you go to bed in the evening in a clean, warm bed, or even if you fall to the floor before reaching the bed, pumped up with alcohol, you don't feel such emotions when the capsule flap closes in front of your face and the countdown before the hyperjump begins. You don't fall asleep at all. You're dying. And you're perfectly well aware of this. Being in your right mind and strong memory, jerks are not allowed into space. That is why the capsule pumps you with sedatives and relaxing drugs that change your consciousness, forcing you, yes, forcing you, not to be afraid of the upcoming sleep, which, in general, is not a dream at all, but a real death. By the way, I was probably overreacting about the jerks. Sometimes the system makes a mistake and they still get on board the ship. Like the same Corporal Abbott who turned off the anesthesia system in my capsule before my very first jump. If I'm talking about garlic, I'm not sure if I died at the moment of hyperjumping, when I was smeared inside the capsule to a state of molecular jelly, or even before jumping from a heart attack. Because it was beating in me in a way that probably doesn't even beat in a death row prisoner when he's being led to the electric chair or the gas chamber. In general, Abbott called it a baptism then. Can you imagine? Christening, damn him. That's a beast. And imagine my state when I found out that Abbott himself had not gone through such a baptism. That bastard didn't experience everything that I experienced. Can you imagine? He made me literally die. But he didn't. Like he was joking. There is not enough evil. Never mind. Our guys will find out about this. Let's see how he will behave. It is possible that he will transfer to another ship altogether, or even go to civilian life. But I'll keep this information for now. Maybe it'll come in handy. In short, we were just coming to our senses after waking up in capsules smeared in biogel. Then I went to the shower with a normal gel and a washcloth. This is not just a necessity, but is considered a rule of good form. Of course, everyone tries to avoid thinking that we actually die with every hyperjump. They make up jokes, joke around, and generally treat it with humor. But as one psychologist I know back on Earth told me, it's a form of psychological defense. It's like trench humor back in the days when soldiers spent most of their time sitting in trenches and trenches under fire, waiting for the next mine or shell to come right at them, or for a shrapnel charge to explode over their heads. So it is with us, those who have decided to enlist in the outer space fleet, where there is no other way except using capsules. Yes, you're probably asking, why the hell not send some clones, which you don't feel sorry for. We tried it. It didn't work out. The clones begin to rebel, no matter how their brains rule them, and the International Pact eventually proclaimed the principle of one body, one personality. So be kind enough to get into the capsule if you want to visit the neighboring star and come back during your children's lifetime without experiencing all the delights of the relativistic effect. Oh yes. The second question usually follows here. Why not send robots? Well, first of all, synthetics are smeared no worse than any other person, but they recover with such mistakes that mom does not grieve. And secondly, and most importantly, they are not trusted to make decisions. This is in case the AI consciousness is uploaded into a pristine synthetic organism. No matter how cool an AI is, the last decision should always be for a human. Can a person mess things up? Maybe. But if an automaton does it, then who should be held accountable? That's it. And so, in general, automatic probes of course are sent. It goes without saying. Actually, we usually follow in their footsteps if they discover something in the depths of our galaxy that will interest the eternally hungry Earth and nearby colonies. Second Lieutenant Sattler was sitting at his locker with only a towel wrapped around his waist, and sullenly sipping hot tea with lemon. Or rather with its aroma. Because such a privilege as to resurrect lemons, apples, and other living organic matter after a jump, is possessed by very sophisticated ships that jump such distances as ours. The trough hasn't even dreamed of it yet. I understand him. I had a similar feeling myself. Post-jump depression. It will pass soon, and tea helps the best, so the second lieutenant drank it for a reason. Wrapping myself in a large towel, I went to the vending machine and poured myself a glass of tea, along with taking a candy bar, and sat down opposite Sattler. Gradually, the rest of the people began to pull up, taking turns going to the tea machine. But judging by the smell, someone decided to drink coffee. Well, there are deviations. Nothing can be done. "What do we have for today, Second Lieutenant?" one of the guys called out. I looked in the direction of the speaker and saw Abbott coming out of the shower, looking quite arrogant as always. Well, live for now. You've made an enemy of yourself, Corporal. However, I suspect that I will not be the first in line to win back. Not today, but tomorrow, the second lieutenant said. Don't you know the rules, Donnie? Or do you want to take an extraordinary test on it? Yes, even now, sir, Donnie replied eagerly. Within 24 hours after waking up, the crew members are monitored by each other in order to identify behavioral abnormalities and possible defects related to the restoration and transfer of the matrix. Well, you see, the second lieutenant said approvingly, you answered your own question. Today we are monitoring each other, restoring our physical condition. And if someone started showing signs of dementia, I decided to put in. And a light chuckle ran through the locker room, and Abbott pretended that it didn't concern him. Especially, Sattler replied sullenly, which caused another wave of laughter. This is good. It helps to get out of post-jump depression. The second lieutenant took another sip. We need to find out how the pilots are, and we will pray to God that they are all safe. I don't want any unnecessary problems. Yes, the last time we jumped, the co-pilot didn't go through the wake-up procedure, turning into something more like a raw steak. And to be honest, each of us crossed ourselves then, thanking the Almighty that this did not happen to any of us. Cynical? Well, I'm sorry. It's every man for himself. Anyway, we pulled on our combat suits and went to a meeting with the crew, namely with the captain, who usually conducted such flights after each awakening. The captain, also in a service jumpsuit, was in the common cabin. He stood in front of the screen and looked at the disk of the planet spread out under the ship, the image of which was transmitted by cameras. At the same time, he kept pulling at the collar with 2 fingers. There were no portholes on the ship, because no one saw the point in them, and in general, it would be a weak point of the ship. So all the portholes have long been stubbornly replaced by screens, especially in ships like ours, which are not pleasure liners. The XO, of course, remained in the control room with the rest of the pilots and weapons system operators. They need to be constantly on the lookout, because you never know what will fly into your side, stern, or head-on, and it may come from the surface of the planet, among other things. Among those with whom people came into contact, well, as if they had just found out about their existence, there were civilizations that were able to go into outer space, and even one that managed to build something like orbital combat stations. It should be immediately clarified here that we are the only intelligent species that can cross interstellar space. The rest, the most they could do, was to launch automatic probes inside the system. Oh yes, there was a case when some reasonable people sent a living crew to explore the outskirts of their star system. But they didn't calculate something there, and the whole crew stupidly starved to death, having previously gone crazy. It's interesting, by the way, how aliens go crazy. Once again, pulling back the collar that was strangling him, the captain turned his attention to our Kodla, who had stumbled into the cabin. Sattler, who had already recovered from depression and had drunk plenty of tea, looked less sullen, but quite consistent with his usual cheerful state. Without asking the captain's permission, we didn't formally obey him. Sattler went to the bar and poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey into a wide glass. He did not dilute the pure product with ice. We have a problem with our representation downstairs, the captain said hoarsely, and sent the information to the second lieutenant on his communicator. Sattler took out a second glass from the cabinet, and pouring another portion of the amber drink, handed it to the captain. He accepted the glass and downed the contents in one fell swoop, this time rubbing his throat with the palm of his hand. What's the big deal that sent us here? By the way, shouldn't our station and container ship be in orbit here? Or are they on the other side of the planet? There are none, the captain replied simply. You mean? Now the second lieutenant became serious, although it looked quite funny. His left eyebrow rose, his eyes froze. The glass of whiskey hovered right next to his mouth, and so he froze for a few seconds. They were shot down, the captain replied indifferently. Shot down? I thought. So we have arrived at one of those planets that can shoot from the surface in orbit. Now it's clear why the same captain is communicating with us. The rest of the crew is at the combat station. Why? Sattler continued. He liked to get information not only from files, but also personally. Besides, it was necessary to fill almost a day of ship's time somehow. We wanted to check it out, the captain replied monosyllabically. What is it? The captain pulled at his collar again, although it obviously didn't hurt him. Whether we can be resurrected. Oh, how? The second lieutenant put his empty glass on the table. I take it that there's something wrong with the representation on the planet, too. Also, they all got killed. How do we know? Sattler poured himself another whiskey, but this time by one finger. The colonists' telemetry is silent. That's it? Maybe they're in a Faraday cage? The locals took them hostage and shoved them somewhere in the basement, so that they couldn't be found. Do you have any requirements? The captain coughed dryly, and without answering anything, simply displayed an image on the screen. The Aborigines consistently and methodically dealt with each Earthling, using a wide variety of methods of killing, so there were no demands because there were no hostages left. Of course, no one has been resurrected in the sense of not awakening. And how can you wake up if you've been slapped outside the capsule? Not at all. That's it. There are irretrievable losses with no options. At the same time, the Aborigines were clearly expecting something, as they watched the executions with some kind of terrible interest on their faces. The guys, who stood out in black and maroon clothes, led the process. The AI of the representative office used drones to film. It was probably the longest sentence given by the captain today. And these, in robes, the second lieutenant asked. Who are they? Local ministers of worship. Sattler looked at us. And how did it all start? Rodriguez, one of our guys, spoke up. Information leak. The captain changed his usual collar plate and rubbed his temples with his fingers. That we're immortal? I asked. That we're dead, the captain replied sullenly. We're dead to them, the ghosts. They came from a place where no one ever returns. I see. It's the well-read Rodriguez again. Someone leaked information about how we cross interstellar space. It is possible that with pictures, and the locals had a culture shock. Religious, I corrected. What? The shock, I say, is religious. They had a crisis of faith. It doesn't matter, Rodriguez waved off. Religion, like any other belief system, is part of the culture of a particular civilization. In general, the Aborigines decided that we were soulless zombies, the living dead, insulting the universe with our mere existence. The most interesting thing is that they are not so far from the truth. I didn't like Rodriguez's last words very much. They hooked something inside of me that I was afraid to voice to myself. And Rodriguez, as if on purpose, adds, and indeed, in a sense, we couldn't be deader. Considering that we were smeared to the state of ectoplasm with each hyperjump, our existence can hardly be called life. The captain returned to his occupation of pulling back his collar. Remember how the priests of the world religions argued on Earth when they developed this technology? How they pushed through the obligatory one-body, one-person convention, which became a kind of compromise. I don't like where you're going with this, Rodriguez, the second lieutenant said, and downed the rest of the whiskey. Can you imagine what a mess is going on in heaven? I'd rather be in hell, Abbott said suddenly. Yes, even in heaven, even in hell, Rodriguez shrugged. There's a fucking cloud of identical souls accumulated there. There was a pause. We thought about the situation, and the main thing was that we didn't like what came into our heads, at least not to me. And then Rodriguez just said it. Unless, of course, we assume that our soul is unique and did not go to another world at the very first hyperjump, and all our subsequent incarnations are deprived of it. And now you seem to realize that no one has yet proved the existence of this very soul, and that this is generally a spiritual and philosophical category, and is not subject to verification. but it still somehow felt uncomfortable. There was a tense silence in the cabin, in which only the captain continued to cough from time to time. Second Lieutenant Sattler got up and walked around the cabin, stopping at one of the false portholes, looked at the image of white clouds and seas. He turned around, addressing the captain. "And what is required of us?" The captain tugged at his collar with his fingers. Ashton Finch woke up with a bad feeling. No, there were still a few days before the flight and he was enjoying his time on Earth, but something went wrong this morning. Actually, something went wrong last night when Jenny started talking about the death capsule, and she literally called it that. The death capsule. It's not acceptable for crew members of deep-sensing ships to say that, even though everyone understood everything. Well, why? Why did you start talking about the upcoming flight? And she also turned him on from that point of view. And how will their relationship develop after you return? What do you mean? And what will change? She hesitated, choosing her words as they strolled through the park. "Well, it's not really going to be you," she finally said. "What?" Finch asked. "What do you mean, not me? And who else, if not me?" "Well, you will be cloned there later, as it were." "Jenny. It's just the kind of technology that allows us humans to fly from star to star. Organics can't stand it, that's true. But the capsule then restores the body, and it's completely, you hear, completely identical to the old one. The Holy Father said that if a person dies, then his soul flies to another world." "What? Since when did you start listening to priests? You've never been to church." As a result, they quarreled, and no intimacy, which he was counting on, did not happen last night. But he had planned for them to spend the rest of their days in bed before the flight. He came home angry and upset, and it looked like it was his last date with Jenny. And really, why the hell is she listening to some holy man? She said they needed money for their future lives, and the Navy pays very, very well. So he decided to earn money for a wedding and a house with a swimming pool. It seems that it's not for nothing that they say that upon returning from space, those who have passed through a jump capsule muddy their relationships with their own kind. Even those who fly through the system in normal hibernation, or at the limit of the capabilities of the human body, do not create families with suicide bombers. Maybe we should give up before it's too late? There was such an opportunity, but it will completely ruin your resume, and where will you go then? Who will hire you if you don't fulfill an already signed contract? And all the arguments in favor of the fact that you suddenly did not want to climb into the death capsule. Ugh, what is this? Will be in favor of the poor. Getting out of bed, he went to the bathroom, where he was first doused with cold water and then almost scalded with boiling water. This has never happened before. Almost slipping on the wet floor, he carefully left the bathroom and began to dress, missing his pant legs several times in a row and tearing his sock. He had to look for a new pair of socks, which were not in place, although he remembered for sure that he had bought spare ones. As a result, I had to wear the same color, but different patterns. Okay, no one will see anything in sneakers or under jeans. As he got dressed, Finch kept running the same thoughts around in circles. It was getting kind of bullshit, he thought, and this despite the fact that it was ships jumping into deep space that provided Earthlings with all sorts of useful resources, without which life could not imagine now. Why the hell am I suddenly going to be different? What does other mean? You fool! Finch remembered his Jenny. And she's not yours anymore. Let him still look for someone like him. Ashton, trying to ward off a bad mood, you can't go on a flight like that, went to the nearest bar in order to drink himself into unconsciousness, so much so that I don't want to throw up. Holy shit. Damn you, he swore, when he opened the door of his apartment. He involuntarily walked under the stepladder, on which a worker in overalls was tinkering with the fire alarm. I couldn't find another place to put it. The worker glanced at Finch and said nothing, deciding that it would be better not to mess with a man in a bad mood. Silently, he went down and rearranged the high stepladder, but Finch, who had passed under it, somehow didn't care. Waving his hand viciously, he went to the elevator and pressed the call button. The elevator wasn't moving. It's broken, the worker said anyway, and receiving Finch's sharp look in response, he added uncertainly, the foreman has already been called. Finch restrained himself from kicking the elevator doors. He still didn't have enough money from the landlord, and went towards the stairs. He had to go down from the 10th floor. Just as everything went wrong yesterday, so it went on today, Finch thought as he walked down the stairs. Somewhere between the 5th and 6th floors he stumbled and almost fell down, breaking bones, but grabbed the railing in time. It turned out that his shoelace had come undone, which he had so successfully stepped on. Every 10,000th awakening, as the procedure for restoring the body in the capsule was called, statistically ends unsuccessfully, namely, with a fatal outcome for the astronaut. It popped up, as luck would have it, in my head. It's not good. It's all a second thought. Maybe I should break the contract and go as a regular handyman. Yes, there will be enough money back to back. You will live from paycheck to paycheck, constantly save, and not get out of loans. Fuck it. I decided to fly. And a big bolt on this Jenny. You'll find someone else and more beautiful, and she won't need to know that you've been to the stars. Looking around, Finch left the entrance and headed towards the bar, deciding to take a shortcut down an alley. A pitch-black cat sat on the side of the road and looked slyly at Finch. Although, of course, he looked as usual, as all cats look at people. But now everything seemed different to Finch. It seemed that the cat even stopped breathing, staring at the future guest of the death capsule. Damn you! Finch caught himself thinking that he was calling the jump capsule something it shouldn't be called. He even tilted his head slightly. Finch took a cautious step forward. The cat bent down to the ground, as if preparing to jump. And? What are you going to do? One more cautious step. The cat bent down even more, taking the on-start position. Don't even think about it. Finch clenched his fists. There were only a couple of meters left before the cat and the invisible line that Finch was going to cross before the black cat ran across his path. But the furry creature, frightened by a dog that appeared out of nowhere, darted to the side, along the opposite wall, and running across the road behind Finch, slipped into some kind of hole in the wall. In fact, Finch was cut off from all sides. Well, there's nothing you can do about it. You'll have to go. Remembering his grandmother's method, Finch folded the muzzle and put it in his pocket, crossing the line along which the black cat had cut his path. Somehow, swearing and cursing everything in the world, Finch still got to the bar, and as soon as he entered, bumped into the waiter, who was carrying 4 empty glasses in both hands. I don't care. He strode across the room, choosing a table in the corner where there were fewer people nearby. Should I say that the table turned out to be cursed? At first, the waitress didn't come up to him for a long time, which made Finch seriously angry. Then, when she finally managed to take the order, she forgot to take a pen to write it down. And when she did bring the order, which for some reason had to wait a long time, she knocked over 1 mug of beer, pouring everything around. Finch rubbed his face with the palm of his hand, trying to contain his growing anger, and literally asked to repeat his order, and even tried to calm the waitress, saying that he would have no complaints if they just brought him his beer. The dumb waitress with round eyes ran off to fulfill the order, which she returned with surprisingly quickly, and even brought an additional portion of pistachios, so to speak, as compensation from the establishment. After finishing the first 2 glasses, Finch ordered a couple more, but dark. And then another, and another. And it seems, he took a full bottle of whiskey, but he didn't remember it exactly, because everything was already a blur. When he finally decided that he had had enough and began to get up from the couch, he realized that all this time he had been sitting on a piece of gum left by a previous customer of the bar. That's the infection, he said, staggering at the table while paying the bill. He smiled angrily at the waitress and went to his house. Although why go home? No! Now he's going to that bitch Jenny and have a heart-to-heart talk with her. Not by phone, but in person. He would personally look into her eyes. And then he'll go. With her? It's possible that with her. To that damned saint who told her all about the damn death capsule. And he hadn't just brainwashed her. He probably treats all his parishioners who are in the habit of visiting him. What a brute. With that thought, he suddenly realized that he was in a completely different part of the city. And how did he get here? And most importantly, how has he not been robbed yet? I should have called a taxi. The taxi didn't go for a long time, and Finch already began to really want to go in a small way. and this somehow did not set up a constructive dialogue with his ex-fiancée, and even more so with the priest. The taxi that arrived eventually broke down halfway. "It's broken, bitch. It's broken." Finch laughed out loud, which scared the Indian taxi driver, who immediately began to ask him to leave the car. Having somehow scraped together cash for part of the route, yes, he forgot the card and he forgot the phone, Finch paid the driver and went wherever his eyes looked. Passing by the park, he still managed to relieve his bladder at some large tree with a memorial plaque, but almost ran into a police patrol. But he didn't have enough articles in his personal file for violating public order. Trying to look as sober as possible, which on the contrary aroused the interest of the cops, he walked past the patrol car. Surprisingly, the cops didn't touch him, only making a couple of jokes in his direction, which, fortunately, he didn't hear. However, the cops were still interested in something about him, and they turned on the flashing light, suddenly demanding that Finch stop. But he, having darted into the interhouse space, surprisingly quickly managed to leave them behind, and the police wouldn't chase a drunken passerby without good reason. Finch barely remembered the events of the last few days leading up to the launch of the shuttle that was supposed to take him and other crew members to the jump ship. What he remembered for sure was that the day before the flight, he pulled himself together and devoted it to getting out of the binge, which, of course, he succeeded, but which did not rid him of a terrible premonition that he could not suppress. "Fuck it," he thought with a kind of angry doom, as the lid of the jump capsule closed, and drugs that helped calm and relax began to flow through his veins. "Peace of mind. Ha ha ha. May your soul rest, Ashton Finch." He laughed softly before passing out dead asleep. When Finch opened his eyes, he didn't immediately understand what had happened, or what he had been doing in recent weeks. At first, he decided that he had woken up in his apartment, and bright sunlight was hitting his eyes through the window, from which he squeezed his eyes shut. But after a couple of seconds, he remembered everything that had happened, and the light that blinded him came from the inner lid of the jump capsule. These were the sensors that carried out the diagnosis of his condition. "He's breathing. Yes, he's breathing. He sees." Finch pinched himself, feels it. But we need to make sure. We urgently need to make sure that everything else is in order too. Jumping out of the capsule, he ran to the shower room, where he began to look at himself in the mirror from all angles. Everything is in place. There is nothing superfluous. Aha! Aha! He was lucky. All the signs aside, nonsense and obscurantism are your signs. Well, Finch, you didn't become Unlucky Joe, as those who were unlucky enough to go through the standard recovery procedure were called. Gone. It's gone, Finch. So it is for all of them. He even jumped. After taking a shower to wash off the remnants of biogel, he went to drink tea, as recommended by experts before departure. Now the people will come up, and he will tell them all how he was plagued by failures just before departure, so he will give food for the appearance of new stories in the Navy. That's enough for a few years. They will acquire new details that did not exist, and they will go from mouth to mouth, acquiring more and more new facts each time. After putting on his combat suit, he went to the wardroom, where he sat on the sofa with his feet up on the table, waiting for his flight companions. I turned on a movie, started watching it, and at the same time poured myself another bulky cardboard glass of tea. He even managed to laugh at some gags in the comedy, but the laugh turned out to be kind of nervous. Something was wrong. What exactly? And the fact that none of the crew has yet come to the cabin. Did they rush to their posts at once? Oh no, it can't be. It turns out that Finch, having come to his senses from the fact that nothing irreparable had happened to him, completely forgot to check the capsules of the rest of the crew. Actually, this was not his responsibility, but still. Returning to the capsule compartment, he began to examine them carefully, remembering the course he had taken shortly before departure. He walked over to the captain's capsule and peered at the sensors. So, there should be sensors on this panel that show whether the capsule is closed, empty or not, and whether the person inside is alive. So, they're all glowing red here. Everything went cold inside, and my heart sank to my heels, hitting the steel floor. An emergency capsule opening system. Here it is. All you have to do is click on the panel. Each crew member has access. That's the order. The lid of the jump capsule lifted up, and a red-maroon, sticky, slippery porridge poured onto the floor, interspersed with something white and red. It seemed as if an eye even slid onto the floor. Finch jumped back, restraining his gag reflex, and walked shakily to the Exo's capsule. The red light appeared again. Realizing what was about to happen, he pressed the padlock anyway. The same disgusting slush poured onto the floor. The next capsule of the engineer is the orange light of life. What does it mean? What does the orange light mean? He had completely forgotten, but with a cold finger he pressed the lock panel anyway. Nothing spilled on the floor. But should we be happy about it? He closed his eyes. Finch took a deep breath and opened his eyes. Good Lord! A strangled sound escaped from his chest. A creature was looking at him. A creature that looked like a man turned inside out, who had also been assembled in violation of all possible instructions. Suddenly, watery eyes with bulging red veins and irregularly shaped pupils looked straight at Finch. Kill him! The hoarse sound came from what should have been a mouth and teeth. Kill me! Finch looked at what had once been a ship's engineer, and he was literally paralyzed by fear. Injection! The creature continued to ask. Injection! The panel! Finch looked at the panel the engineer was talking about. With trembling fingers, he selected the necessary option, and how he remembered it, and pressed the button. The engineer creature jerked and went limp, and Finch closed the capsule. There were still 6 capsules left. 6 capsules, the panels of each of which were glowing red. You're so lucky, Joe, Finch said resignedly. Strelnikov found Mike Kinski at the shuttle with a tablet in his hands, diligently pressing buttons on the screen. What's in there? Strelnikov tried to look over Kinski's shoulder. Nothing that could concern you. Kinski waved it off, but explained anyway. I signed for the installation of a new server on the ship. What was wrong with the old one? Strelnikov was surprised. He seemed to be normal. That's a lot of money spent. Is Lavoy aware? That's right, it's old. I've been buggy many times, Kinski replied, disagreeing and stuffing the tablet into his bag. And the money is not yours, but the company's. Don't worry, your salary won't be affected. You'll get your pay in full accordance with the contract. Actually, Lavoy was the initiator. Well, if he doesn't get hurt, then okay, no problem. Strelnikov shrugged. The main thing for me is that upon my return, everything should be paid to the penny, and so buy whatever you want. Even a new head made of gold, and silk sheets in the cabins. Mike Kinski gave Strelnikov a stern look. That's it. I'm leaving. I'm leaving. Strelnikov put his hands in front of him and ran up the ladder into the shuttle, which was supposed to deliver a team of 10 people to a jump ship waiting for them in orbit. The rest of the suicide squad was supposed to arrive soon, but Strelnikov always arrived in advance. That was his sign. Considering that, according to statistics, every 10,000th jump turned out to be fatal for a crew member, all jumpers were much more superstitious than the average citizen. Why suicide bombers? No. Not because once you put your little body in a capsule, you might not wake up. The thing is that the human body, like any other false organism, could not tolerate hyperjumping in principle, as a result of which it turned into a bloody mess, and the capsule restored the body back upon arrival. In fact, anyone who signed a contract to fly into deep space, starting from the nearest star, agreed to mandatory death. Yes, you were later restored, in fact cloned, but the sediment, as they say, remained, and this was felt even when communicating with close relatives. Someone says that the person restored in the capsule is no longer the same person. They say, during the resurrection, mistakes are still made in cloning, and the body, including the brain, does not turn out to be identical to what it was before being placed in the capsule. Well, what can I say? A person who went to bed in the evening and a person who woke up in the morning are far from identical, even in terms of body weight. So the capsule makers do not pay attention to such arguments. Yes, it is probably worth mentioning that at first the authorities tried to hide such an extraordinary method of interstellar flights. But, as always, there was a lover of the truth who cared about everything and had to notify the public about the conspiracy of the authorities. The information was leaked to the World Wide Web, and a major global scandal ensued, involving ethics and religious hysteria. For a while, people even tried to catch the living dead and deal with them, even if they had nothing to do with interstellar flights. All kinds of secret societies appeared, whose members forced those to undress, who seemed suspicious to them. For some reason, They decided that a clone could be identified by some special mark on the body. Fools and fanatics, in a word. But as time went on, and at least the situation settled down, the political and spiritual leaders of the main faiths, as well as scientists, came to a certain consensus, reached a compromise, and finally recognized those who flew to the stars as full-fledged people, and even agreed that they had a soul. Although no one has ever seen it, which is not surprising, given that faith does not require empirical evidence, and its postulates cannot be verified. By the way, the Buddhists had the least complaints in this regard, who said that this was an ordinary rebirth and generally a shit question. It's like karma. If the soul enters the same body after resurrection, then there are no complaints, the wheel of samsara and all that. It is not surprising that as a result, many astronauts and cosmonauts, if not openly, still felt sympathy for this religion, or even converted to it altogether. Soon, the rest of the team joined in, with a total of 5 male crew members and the same number of female members. In general, the Osiris team was even proud of such a composition, which had been formed for a long time, and together they had already made more than a dozen jumps. Offhand, the presence of another similar crew with equal pay for women and men is hard to even remember. And in ordinary life they were quite friendly. They spent more than one holiday together, getting drunk into utter rubbish. Although, it's worth noting that it was somewhat problematic to establish relationships with ordinary people. Once Fauci showed up for a family holiday in Sardinia, deciding that they had simply forgotten to invite him in the confusion. It turned out that they had not forgotten. It turned out that they were not invited consciously. For most of the evening, his family shunned him, trying not to communicate with him once again. As a result, he told everyone to fuck off and left this miserable event, as he later dubbed it. It felt like they saw a rebelling relative in front of them, who had long since passed away. And one day their entire team, wearing jackets with navy stripes pointing to deep space, stumbled into one of the city's bars, wanting to celebrate their safe return. All conversations immediately died down inside, and everyone stared at them as if they were a tour group of Centerville ghosts. After showing one big group fact to all the honest people, they took drinks with them, which the bartender still sold them, and went to get drunk in another place where suicide bombers like them gathered. Here's the deal. In the shuttle, when everyone was sitting down, Kinski greeted everyone except Strelnikov, whom he had already seen before. He exchanged a few words about something, drowned in the growing hum of the engines, with a system technician named Lavoie. Everyone put on headphones with a microphone and checked the health sensors. Well, is everyone ready? The voice of the shuttle commander sounded in the earpiece, once a suicide bomber like them. But who decided that after 2,000 jumps, he had had enough of trying his luck and joined the spaceport? Kinski examined his crew, checked their telemetry on his comm console, which showed that everyone was healthy as bulls, and spoke into the microphone. Everything is fine, we can leave. Let's go. The commander of the shuttle responded, which immediately began to gain speed, and the overload pushed everyone into their seats. The Osiris was docked to the orbital station from which loading and unloading was carried out. In addition to their ship, 2 other container ships were seen at the docking sites, apparently recently arrived from deep space and undergoing quarantine. Another couple of trucks were hanging out on courses parallel to the station. Most of the cargo ships jumped in automatic mode. They were serviced by teams that had already jumped and were at the place of departure. The Osiris was not a cargo ship, but a courier ship, and just a little bit of a reconnaissance ship. Sometimes, it's necessary to deliver parcels there or letters that can't be sent by an automatic probe. And instant communication channels between stations located in different star systems have not yet been invented. And they won't come up with it, after all. The speed of light, it's the speed of light. There was no need for the Osiris to attach cargo containers to itself. Everything necessary for organic synthesis at the place of arrival had already been loaded into the compartments, and the reactor happily reported that there would be enough fuel for another 100 jumps in autonomous mode. People were undressing and settling into jump pods, although, to be honest, it wasn't necessary to get into it naked. During the restoration, mixing with clothing fabrics was eliminated. But we remember that those who jump into deep space are deeply superstitious guys. So it's better to completely undress and go to meet the alien stars in this form. The crew, is everyone ready? Kinski's voice came from the speaker as the lid of the jump capsule slammed shut, ensuring its complete tightness. An unforgettable journey awaits us. Drugs began to flow through the veins, designed to suppress the instinct of self-preservation and put people to sleep. When Strelnikov fell out of the capsule and went to the shower, everything was fine. Perhaps this was his best awakening. He did not even feel post-jump depression. Although, as experience has shown, it could come back later. But if you drink tea with lemon, why he helped, no one knew. Then it can be avoided altogether. And everything was fine right up to the moment when, going into the shower, he saw himself from the outside. No, not in the mirror. In reality. Sonya Strelnikov, happy with life and clearly enjoying the good mood from a successful awakening and the absence of post-jump depression, was diligently lathering himself with fragrant lime gel. It took him a few seconds to realize that waking up hadn't been as great as he'd thought a few minutes ago. Ahem, Strelnikov coughed, attracting the doppelganger's attention. The double washed the foam from his eyes and stared at his counterpart, wondering if he had gone crazy. Having come to the logical conclusion that no, he did not go, the second Strelnikov blurted out the only thing his speech apparatus could give out in such a situation. Fucked up. And at that moment, from somewhere in the depths of the ship, a heart-rending female scream rang out, and then another one, and yet, throwing on their dressing gowns, the second Strelnikov only managed to quickly wash off the remnants of biogel from their heads. They ran towards the sounds of shouting and increasing male abuse. You told me that the server is still working, that it will work without problems for another cycle, Kinski hissed at Lavoy, grabbing him by the collar of his combat jacket. If it had been made of standard fabric, it would probably have already come apart at the seams. Unforeseen circumstances have occurred. The system operator tried to free himself from the captain's grip no less aggressively. A flash on a star, and we have a problem with protection. And you knew about it. I should have taken care of the core. Are you trying to pin everything on me? It was your idea with the server. But you agreed right away. At that moment, when it seemed like it was going to come to a fight with self-mutilation, the rest of the duplicated crew rushed into the cabin, pushing duplicates of Lavoy and Kinski in front of them. The muzzles of the latter had clearly recently been slowed down by someone's fists. The first Kinski's gaze slid over the figures, catching on the downed knuckles of one of the Strelnikovs and both Fauci. Of course, that's what you'd expect from these guys. Well, Strelnikov began, or rather one of them. Is this the unforgettable trip that you promised us before we left? Okay, people. Kinski put his hands in front of him. I can explain everything. I can't even imagine how you can do that. Irene shook her head, standing next to her double. And it was obvious that the same words were on the tip of her tongue. It was just Irene who said them first. I can't even imagine. Especially since you, Takeda said, holding the collar of the same rumpled second Lavoy from behind. You've already told us everything. Do you even understand what you've done? Ellie shouted. Don't you get paid enough? Do you want more and more? See where your greed has taken us. Kinski, both Kinski, and both system engineers sat silently in front of the rest of the crew, staring at the floor. It's probably going to sound corny, one of the Strelnikovs said calmly. But I suspected something was wrong before we left. And you? Did you feel anything? Yeah, the second Strelnikov nodded, examining the knocked-down knuckles. One-on-one, what did you say? As soon as I heard that they had bought a new server, something bad stirred inside. And it turns out they didn't buy any server. It turns out that they appropriated the money for themselves and decided to keep the old server by making a new firmware. But we saved money on protecting the hull, you bastards. What rats you are! Fauci blurted out angrily. The rest of the female part of the double crew literally ate up the look of the would-be scammers. Kinski glanced at his other self, and then his eyes darted between the two women. Did it for you, Irene. And Lavoy for you, Yara. We thought we'd stop jumping after this flight. Change your documents, buy a house in some warm country and live in peace. Well, thank you. Both Irenes waved their hands almost synchronously. Did you ask me? Everyone even looked at them, considering how they did it, and said it at the same time. Irene looked at each other and folded her arms on her chest. But we'll still have to decide what to do next, one of them finally asked an urgent question. I heard a similar story once, Strelnikov said. I thought it was an ordinary deep space bike. And how did it end there? Fauci asked. Nothing good, replied the second Strelnikov. But we're not them. Irene is right. Something needs to be done. I have a suggestion, Lavoy decided after a long silence. The one on the left. Everyone immediately looked at him. I understand that my voice doesn't mean much in the current situation, but— Speak up, Takeda ordered, not giving Lavoy time to gather his courage. We can land the duplicates on the nearest habitable planet with a supply of provisions. There is one nearby. You won't have to jump, Lavoy suggested. I think the remaining crew will have enough resources to get to the nearest GC station. Ha! One of the Strelnikovs crossed his legs and crossed his arms over his chest. And who will decide who is the double and who is the original? What are you? And let the doubles, as you called them, die on the surface of an unfamiliar world. Who do you think you are, asshole? This is the second Strelnikov. Whoever got out of the capsule first, that's the original. Valois snapped, while the second Valois was even somewhat surprised by this reaction of his double. At this point, Kinski stirred, or rather, both at once. If we were identical, he said, we would behave identically. Actually, it is. This is one of Takeda's onboard doctors. Really. The same Lavoy version got all worked up. And then why are we not talking synchronously? But we don't occupy one place in space, Takeda objected. And therefore, an infinite number of factors affect each of us, each of our versions. We are absolutely identical genetically, and the fact that we do not mirror each other's movements is just completely normal. But someone got out of the capsule first, and someone else got out second, said Valois' double, who had been silent until that moment. He probably decided that if he continued to sit quietly, then he would be the one who would be landed on the planet. He clearly didn't like the prospect of being abandoned on the planet, just as Caribbean pirates used to do in ancient times, landing on a desert island, those who for some reason didn't want to be allowed on the board, or stretched under the keel. It doesn't matter, Takeda insisted, to the approving nods of his second self. We are exactly the same organisms, recreated with the help of a matrix. Moreover, he held up a finger. If you rested the horn, then theoretically the real one could have left the capsule just the second, and not the first. Cool. Strelnikov shook his head, and the other one patted him on the shoulder. Then we have no choice but to cast lots, Yara said for the first time. They went around the ship to think about their decision and prepare for the draw, which was decided to be drawn in the classic way, pulling specially printed dice, black or white, out of the bag. The bones were absolutely identical, and did not contain any tangible images so that no one could cheat. A white bone means you stay on the ship and continue to live a normal life. A black bone means you get to become a colonist on the planet. Everyone understood that colonization could end quite quickly, from the teeth of a local predator or from exposure to an unknown virus, but they did not voice it. Soon, both Strelnikov were spotted in the galley drinking something very strong. They talked heart to heart, recalling events from their childhood, and sometimes one corrected the other if someone remembered something not quite right. After that, they clinked glasses and toasted each other. In the end, they even drank to good luck, wishing it to each other as much as possible. They did not specify what they meant by it. You take care of Ellie, okay? Said one Strelnikov. She's the best thing I've ever seen in my life. I know, the other replied. You too. Let's have a drink? Come on. The others also scattered to spend the remaining time before arriving in the orbit of the nearest planet. The rescue bot, which was decided to be used to land on the planet, was blamed for the accident, having cleaned up the files, removing all traces of the system failure at the same time. Strelnikov was at his post and watched as the planet on which they had left their doppelgangers receded on the screen, becoming smaller and smaller. Do you think, Ellie asked, they'll survive? I don't know, Strelnikov replied. I think that yes, they will survive. After all, they are our reflection, and we are a great crew. Hopefully, no one will come to this planet for the next 100 years. The minimum. And when she does, she won't raise the issue of genetic analysis with those who will be living on it by then, Ellie added, and Strelnikov patted her hand. Hopefully they'll have time to come up with a suitable cover story. They'll come up with it, don't even doubt it. Ellie wrapped her arms around his neck from behind, and together they continued to watch as the planet's disk eventually turned into just a small point of light among the many similar lights scattered in the vast universe. Richie took a deep breath. The filtered air passed through the nostrils, trachea and nasopharynx. He held his breath a little, exhaled. He opened his eyes. His gaze rested on the inner wall of the capsule. Good thing he hadn't lost his eyesight. He closed one eye and opened it. I did the same with the second one. Well, he sees with both eyes. He wiggled his fingers on his hands. Then on my feet. Each finger obeyed the impulses coming from the brain. That's good too. He ran his tongue over his teeth, and they were there, just like his tongue. Then, fearing the worst, he felt himself in other places, including those that are usually covered with a fig leaf or an accidentally fallen strip of cloth in old frescoes and paintings. No, everything is in place, and there was nothing superfluous, which was also good news. It means that his 10,000th time has not yet arrived. After all, every 10,000th jump, or rather every such resurrection, according to statistics, ends unsuccessfully. On the other hand, there may have been 2 unsuccessful recoveries in some crew at once, or even more. He hadn't heard of it, but he wasn't kidding. Richie closed his eyes again and took a deep breath. He smiled. His senses tell him that the capsule lid closed in front of him just a minute ago, and he just wanted to sleep. That's how the drugs worked. And the next moment, he had already opened his eyes, alert and ready to work. The green light turned on. Now the lid will slide aside and the capsule will finally open. A second later, it happened. And the first thing Richie saw was Chloe's bare back and buttocks. As always, she was pacing around the compartment in her mother's clothes, and opalescent biogel was flowing down her body. It's the same as always. That's good too. Richie took hold of the edges of the capsule and reached out to meet the next mission, from which they were sent to Tau Ceti by the bosses of the company. The contract must be fulfilled, otherwise you don't have any money in your account, and if you don't have money, you don't have a normal life. And the money will be needed. That's why you got into this coffin, isn't it? Or is it more accurate to say that you need a lot of money precisely because you got into it? Dialectic, however, Richie grinned, and at that moment, a shot rang out. A shot? What? On board? How? Why? And right there, next to his capsule, Chloe fell from somewhere on the side to the floor, slippery with biogel. She looked at Richie in surprise and tried to say something while the blood was flowing under her. The next shot blew her head off. Somewhere outside, the screams and moans of dying people could be heard. What the hell is going on? Richie saw the answer to this question a couple of seconds later, when the barrel of a shotgun pressed against his stomach. He didn't even think to look at the one holding the gun. He stared at the chrome barrel of the shotgun with some incomprehensible stupor. "Are you awake yet?" he heard a familiar voice. "Well, go back to sleep." He didn't even feel the pain, just a hard push in the stomach. Tea with lemon. No one really knows why this is the best remedy for post-capsule depression, but it helps, admittedly, perfectly. Connoisseurs also add mint, or even lemon balm. But, according to Richie, pure black tea with lemon is better. You can, of course, make do with ordinary strong tea, but with lemon the effect is achieved much faster. You're not so full of all sorts of unnecessary thoughts in space, especially after you found out how the capsule you climbed into just a few hours ago works. And now, while the ship's AI performs diagnostics after jumping to Tau Ceti, you're sitting in the lounge and sipping tea. With eclair. Although Victor Zotov, a technician, makes himself tea so strong that his jaw cramps. And we drink it without lemon. Richie tasted his tea once, he almost threw up, it was so strong. In general, you can do without tea, but who wants to worry about feeling worthless and losing the meaning of life for a few hours when you have to work? The contract must be fulfilled, otherwise you will not receive a reward, which means that everything you signed up for when you boarded the jump ship was in vain. Therefore, Richie sat quietly in the wardroom and drank tea from his personalized cup, in which 2 slices of a bright yellow fragrant lemon floated. Good. Well, when you woke up, the capsule opened and you had all the body parts in place, but you weren't turned inside out. And this, as he had heard, happened. They say there is a whole market on Earth that sells videos with the results of unsuccessful resurrections. Richie didn't understand what kind of pervert you had to be to watch that. A couple of meters away from him, the same Zotov was sprawled on the couch, devouring his kefir. And in front of Richie himself, Chloe, who was wearing only pink loose-fitting shorts, was clinking a spoon against the edges of a cup as if nothing had happened. Zotov, who had been flying with Chloe in the same crew for much longer than Richie, no longer seemed to pay any attention to her appearance. And Richie seemed to keep blushing every time Chloe said or did something to draw attention to herself. Each crew is a small commune, united by the fact that they will never be the same in the eyes of other people. Within such micro-communities, their own orders and habits developed. The others should arrive soon, including the captain, who was most likely reading the ship's status reports and recent correspondence, if any, from the mail probe. Suddenly, an alarm siren wailed nasally, and the main lighting went out, replaced by red alarm flashes. "What's that supposed to mean?" Chloe jumped up from her chair, and Richie unwittingly squinted in her direction. And try not to mow here. At all these fluctuations, although one could have gotten used to her quirks a long time ago. Then, like a normal crew member, she would pull on a jumpsuit. But in the first hours after recovery, it was good if she wore shorts like now. "Alarm!" Zotov boomed in a puzzled voice and scratched his head. "Apparently, I haven't fully recovered from the capsule yet." "Thank you, Cap." Chloe threw back and rushed to the doors, which opened right in front of her. The next moment, she collapsed to the floor, mowed down by a shotgun blast. "Oh, you!" Zotov only managed to shout, hurling his heavy mug at the one who entered the mess, but was immediately hit by buckshot, which left him sitting on the sofa, but already in a pool of his own blood. "You?" Richie was surprised. "What are you talking about?" "Yes, it's me, but who were you waiting for?" the man replied, smiling, and pulled the trigger. Chloe, Richie thought when he saw the onboard doctor in a negligee. "You're back in your repertoire. And don't tell me fairy tales that it makes it easier for you to bear depression after resurrection. You just like playing with us, and you just want to show off your figure. Although yes, I have to admit, your body is gorgeous." The rest of the women in the crew still preferred to put on a bathrobe and take a quick shower rather than shine their charms in front of the male part of the crew, even if they knew it like the back of their hand. By the way, why can't you take a shower right away in a capsule, so that you can get out of it already clean and pink as a baby? You need to pitch this idea to capsule manufacturers. What if you're going to be paid royalties for it all your life? And like no one had thought of that before? How naive you are, Richie. Sighing, Richie grabbed the sides of the capsule and climbed out. Right now, he was also in Adam's costume, and smeared all over with biogel. But after a shower, unlike Chloe, he would wear a jumpsuit, and would not flash his intimate parts right and left. He pulled a robe out of the locker and took out a towel. She would have to talk to the captain so that he would eventually stop this practice of hers. Another thing is, if he likes Chloe's behavior himself, or even he's resigned, then everything will be to no avail, and he, Richie, will gain fame as a kind of whiner and snitch. And these are not at all the qualities that are appreciated by the crew members of a small ship, and not only a jump ship. You see, then he won't be able to get into any carriage. Well, to hell with her. Let her walk as she wants, especially since after a couple of hours she'll wear something anyway, at least the same shorts. And there's a lot to see. She knows she's being stared at. He must know. I wonder how Summers looks at it. They seem to be having an affair. Crew members of jump ships often have affairs, because it's almost impossible to get along with someone from ordinary people who want to hug someone who has died. Perhaps more than a dozen, or even 100 times. After drinking tea with lemon, Richie left the wardroom, where the captain had not looked in. Strangely, he usually always comes to greet the crew, because he is usually the first to get out of the capsule. But he didn't come, as well as some other crew members. Zotov dropped by to stare at a half-naked Chloe, and also pretends that he doesn't care, 3 times, huh? Jess took a sip of tea and went to the post. Eric was still there. Then he went to the bridge. It's time for me to go, Richie thought, returning the cup to a special niche in the wall. Hi. He turned at the sound of footsteps entering the cabin and smiled. Bye, the guest replied and launched an axe at Richie's head. What the hell is going on the ship? Richie thought, creeping through the corridors and cautiously peering into open cabins and compartments. The alarm was blaring, and the dim emergency lights were burning red. Richie carefully made his way through the corridors, the walls of which were smeared with bloodstains, among which human handprints were easily recognizable. One of the cabin doors kept opening and closing, bumping into a dead body. "Are you completely crazy?" Richie shouted from the airlock. "It sounds insulting," a voice came from the speaker. "But I must admit that, unfortunately, it is quite possible." "Stop it now!" "Why?" the voice from the speaker answered again. The next moment, Richie realized that the floor had gone from under his feet. My chest burned unimaginably, and my lungs tried to breathe in the emptiness. His eyes quickly turned cloudy, but Richie managed to see the stars surrounding him and even wonder how beautiful they were. Richie was trying to catch his breath. Eric was bleeding nearby. A dangerous thought touched Richie's mind. Dangerous, but true. She demanded action. I should have left a sign, and to do that you need to get to the capsule. Or at least go back to the mess. He adjusted his grip on the knife he'd found in the galley. Sitting on the couch in the wardroom, Richie stared at the bottom and inner walls of his cup, and couldn't believe that he had launched it to such a state. Had he not washed it for so long that there was such a dark residue on the walls and bottom? Something didn't fit. He remembered exactly how he had washed it before the jump. "What's this?" Richie looked closer. There was clearly something written on the bottom. More precisely, it was scratched with the tip of a teaspoon or a toothpick on a dark tea coating. "What the—" "Who's the killer?" Richie asked himself after reading the inscription. "Do what?" "Chloe, are these your jokes?" He turned to his colleague, who was sitting on another sofa in only flannel trousers, with her arms outstretched on its back. "What?" she replied. "What do you mean?" Suddenly, the main lighting went out. With some seventh sense, Richie brought everything together and shouted, "Let's go! Let's get out of here, quickly!" He grabbed Chloe's arm and pulled her along. He didn't even understand how and where they broke up with Chloe. It seems she ran to get a weapon. He hasn't seen her since. Escaping from the pursuit, Richie managed to drop by Zotov's post, where all the monitors were working properly. He was holding a heavy adjustable wrench in one hand, which he found right there, and was waiting for his pursuer to come after him. Actually, there was nowhere else to run. If he ran out into the hallway, he would become an easy target. He listened, but there were no approaching footsteps yet. Instead, a heart-rending scream reached his ears from the depths of the ship. So the killer is still busy. We should try to contact the orbital base. If the ship jumped out where it was planned, then she should be close enough to pick up the signal and send a rescue team. Richie began tapping the keys and sensors very quickly. So, we need to understand how close they are to the base. An image appeared on one of the monitors. He looked at the screen and did not recognize the star in which they were supposed to pop out today. But it was definitely not Tau Ceti, some completely different star. And when the edge of the planet's disk appeared on the screen, he was convinced of his guess. And where are they now? Does that mean they're off course? And there is no orbital base? Is no one coming to help? No. This can't be happening. We need to do a spectral analysis of the star. Yes, Richie, my boy. The system administrator waddled as if on hinges, holding a shotgun in one hand and a knife dripping with blood in the other. He had a garland of ears around his neck. You got it right. Oh, by the way, this is the 5th time you figured it out. Think about it. The 5th time? Well, yes. The kind when you got out of the capsules. To be honest, I've lost count of how many times I've turned them on. But you, I must admit, turned out to be the smartest of them all. The system engineer bowed dramatically, trying to make a curtsy. If it weren't for you, it would be completely boring, honestly. I've already got this one who likes to get naked here. The system guy rested the butt of a bloody knife on his own Adam's apple. The captain's a real jerk, too. However, all captains are jerks. They have an occupational disease. Did you know that you almost always do the same things when you wake up in a capsule? The same ones. Every time. Every time. In the end, I decided that it wasn't interesting to kill you immediately after recovery, so I had to improvise somehow. Force you to act differently than you would have. It's such an interactive show, Richie. Sometimes it turned out to be very, very funny, honestly. Think about it. I even managed to roll around in bed with our nude lover. Richie was holding a massive wrench with both hands, which he intended to use as a weapon. But so far, no opportunity has turned up. You know, the system engineer smiled. I suddenly wondered how many more times you could guess, huh? Otherwise, your colleagues are too dumb in this area. And anyway, the system guy said regretfully. I seem to be a normal guy, but Chloe's manner of wandering around naked after her resurrection frankly got to me. Really. I even started coming her first at some point. That's the principle. He laughed an unnatural laugh. Richie didn't know what to do. If he attacks the system operator first, he will have time to shoot. Take off in an attempt to escape? The bullet, again, is faster. And you know what, Richie? The system engineer abruptly stopped laughing. You have no way out, dear. Do you get it? Why? Richie continued to calculate. Do you know who came out of the capsule the way he entered it? The answer was obvious, but Richie voiced it anyway. You. I am. The system engineer looked comically pleased. Me, motherfucker. And all of you. He waved the barrel of the shotgun in the air. You're all just copies, forbidden to exist. So I'm sorry, but you will never leave the deck of this ship. And you will wake up in your coffins as long as I want you to. And I love it. Fuck you, Richie shouted and swung the monkey wrench. The bullet was faster. It's good when you wake up in a capsule and your arms and legs are in place. And all the other important organs too. Richie inhaled and exhaled. Now he will open the capsule and see Chloe walking around the compartment in a negligee. He smiled. After all, everything was fine. The thing is, all of you probably already know that you can't just fly into deep space. More precisely, it is possible, but there will be pleasure from such a flight. As one of my Russian friends says, skulkin nos. I have no idea what it is at all. I just realized that it is very, very little. As the same friend Shishdane Shisha said, which never clarified the situation with Russian idioms. In general, yes, flying into deep space, namely to other star systems, is quite a dreary business. Either you're trudging along at about the speed of light, and your journey stretches over years, that's good. But hundreds of thousands of years pass on Earth, and then what's the point? Or you use hyperjump technology, moving from point to point in the galaxy in a matter of seconds. That is, you jumped to Alpha Centauri, and the light from the star, that is, from Alpha, which hits you through the porthole, is just beginning its 4-year journey to Earth. It's great, isn't it? But there is a small nuance, where without it, the human body is not able to survive this jump and turns into an indigestible liquid, more like jelly. I once saw this when a capsule went down and couldn't recover the body of one of the pilots. I'll tell you what a sight. I immediately threw up, and the smell of vomit and this jelly haunted me for several more weeks, surviving a couple more jumps with me. There is no way that the capsule, restoring the body, erases such memories, but no. The law is that the same person who entered the capsule must exit the capsule. And if you wanted some kind of disgrace from your school life, which makes you want to hide under the bed and not get out of there, from your own biography, then fire it. It's with you forever. Well, to be precise, no animal can survive such a thing. They tried to freeze it, to no avail. Something is wrong there, and at the exit from the hyperjump, the unfrozen person is, how should I put it mildly, inadequate. It seems that something is wrong with the reagents for freezing. They have not yet come up with a suitable one. Why would there be an inadequate person in space? He's not needed there at all. You can go crazy there anyway. We are already on drugs that do not allow our roof to go far, and for a long time in conditions of visibility of the Earth in the porthole. And it would seem, the way out is obvious. Use robots. They don't mind such a leap and enjoy life. Let the thinking hardware do research, mining, loading and unloading, and other activities. And they seem to be used, but someone needs to repair them, do preventive maintenance and the like. Otherwise the nut will fly off and the whole automatic plant will stand up. And yes, repair robots break down too. Oh, I almost forgot. Every time after a jump you need to run a full diagnostic. Because physical media, like software, have a nasty feature. Yes, it crashes after a jump. But the Matrix, as luck would have it, writes off a person completely, and then restores him in a capsule, called a sarcophagus, or simply a coffin between the pilots. So we're wandering around the galaxy, in these coffins, waiting for them to come up with something better. So, what am I talking about? Oh yes, in general, we die every time a hyperjump occurs. But this is, if I may say so, a proper contractual death. So my Russian friend, who recently transferred to our board, told me a story that he once witnessed when they were walking on marching engines after jumping to a planet rich in mineral resources. There were robots working there, digging, mining, sorting, enriching, and all that. But something broke down there, and the cargo ship that had been in orbit for a month could not go to Earth because it was stupidly not loaded. In short, their team had to debug some mechanisms and then go to another facility. And he told me the following. After jumping out of hyperjump, the crew, as usual, recovered, sipped tea. The captain checked the latest messages received on the receiver from one of the automatic mail stations that popped up in the same sector of space as them. Well, what did you want? Send information by radio? Yes, even by means of a light signal. It will take years for the message to reach the addressee. What if he was sent from 300 light years away? Whether there is any sense at all in such a message, judge for yourself. And so, the automatic mail probe jumps. It doesn't matter to him. Let's send the information to the receiver. Otherwise, he will personally dock and transmit the message on a physical medium. Yes, that's how we got to the usual, consider it, mail, only on the scale of space. In general, the captain drinks tea with lemon, comes to himself after recovery, reads all sorts of reports that the nearest mail probe has sent us. But it turns out that while the crew was recovering, in the sense of recovering in the capsules, the probe managed to dock, which happens, frankly, not often, unless you specifically wait for some kind of package and unloaded encrypted data packets. The captain prints out something that requires special attention, puts it aside, and scrolls through it quickly. And so he flips through the tape on the monitor, flips through, and then he gets dumbfounded and lets call the XO to him. And Silent was the XO. It was he who found the captain in his own cabin, where he was sitting in his underpants and scratching the week-old stubble on his chin. Where did you think? With which, of course, he climbed into the capsule a few hours ago. Look, he says to Selena. What do you think? Well, my friend, the XO takes a fresh printout that still smells of paint, flips through it, and starts scratching his stubble himself. No, on my face, not on the captain's. Come on, whatever. Do you think he's one of them? What's to think? According to the documents, it turns out that it is. Do you see the check mark? I see. Why not see her? We need, says the captain. Rodriguez. You know what? Our hero's name was Rodriguez. My friend didn't mention his name. I wouldn't rush it, the XO says. Actually, it's an official warrant, the captain says seriously. This is, consider it, an order to action. Do you get it? I get it. How can I not get it? But we'd like to talk to Rodriguez first. About what? You know they don't understand anything between the two restorations. He'll deny it to the point of stupefaction. But do we need this? And what will we hear? That's when he got in and then he got out? Yes, we already know that. We have his entire track record. But here, the captain shook the paper in his hand, is what he forgot to tell us. Yes, but... Silent hesitated, unable to formulate what exactly did not suit him. You know what? The captain drank the remains of the already cold tea in a big gulp and put the mug on the table. I don't need all these squabbles and scandals on board. Can you imagine what kind of confusion can start if everyone finds out? They'll find out anyway, the XO said reasonably. After all, we will have to somehow detain Rodriguez. Yes, but if we don't comply with the warrant... The captain finally got up and began to dress, pulling on overalls. The crew will start to grumble, if they realize that this one is among them. So, maybe not to tell, Silent suggested. Until we get back. The captain shook his head, putting on a face full of sarcasm. You know who's sitting at the reception, right? Yeah. Then that's not an option. And besides, It's a shame. There will be a scandal. Everyone will point fingers at us. Don't we care? We are fulfilling the contract well. No matter how we lose our contracts later, that's the question. Then that leaves neutralization, the XO finally agreed. Shall we go? The captain buttoned up his combat jacket, put on his shoes, grabbed papers and weapons, and together with the executive officer, they moved to the mess. They are walking along the deck. They are already approaching the wardroom, and suddenly Rodriguez comes towards them, hugging the waists of two members. Ahem, in the sense of two young ladies' crew members. Rodriguez, when he saw the captain and the XO, and the first one had a pistol in one hand and papers in the other, and his face was as serious as it could be. He literally changed his face, turned gray, and how he would push the girls at them, and how he would rush down the corridor. They only saw him. Here, the captain said sententiously, and you said to wait. I was wrong, Silent admitted, helping the young ladies, stunned by such treatment, to get up. The latter did not skimp on the strongest expressions that can only be heard in the Navy, which caused the captain to frown. And when the captain briefly described the essence of the problem to them, the expressions became even more expressive. Oh well. In general, the alarm was sounded on the ship and the rest of the crew began to catch the fugitive. The ship was still being tested, and the AI was keeping the situation under control, along with reporting on where Rodriguez had been spotted recently. He immediately uploaded all the information to the captain's and XO's tablets, especially from those compartments where interruptions in the operation of surveillance systems were noticed. That's where we should have been looking for Rodriguez. Well, keep in mind that the latter may well be armed, because people like him can do anything, even the most terrible crime. They have nothing to lose. They need to understand. And the hunt began. Admittedly, at first Rodriguez did not even think to shoot back, which was somewhat alarming, and suggested that he did not have a weapon after all. But when the captain fired the first round of the pistol, our heroes received the same one in response, which was extremely frapped. Yes, if anything, the bullets fired from it cannot penetrate the overlap or the side. Special ammunition with reduced kinetics and a special alloy. And interestingly, Rodriguez turned out to have the same one, which suggested that he did not want to be thrown into outer space by decompression at all. Well, yes, why am I telling you this? You already know that. But who knows, maybe he has a couple of magazines with regular live ammunition. Well, let's say it won't break through the skin, but it's not a big deal to damage the equipment, and this may lead to a violation of the terms of the contract. And the ship, you know, costs money, and then you'll get tired of writing explanations that you're not a camel, and that you're not going to pay damages to the company in light of force majeure, and it's not a fact that the company won't drag you through the courts. Anyway, this Rodriguez gave them problems. In short, they chased him around the decks and compartments, and several times they even thought that they had completely lost him. Although I can't imagine how this is possible on a ship. But Rodriguez was clever. No other way. At some point, it was thought that he had decided to self-destruct, so to speak, by throwing himself into outer space when the airlock was detected opening. But the sensors did not detect any objects near the ship. I have no idea how he managed to trick the ship's AI, but as it turned out, he actually put on a spacesuit at some point and waited outside the hull for a while, and then returned back on board. There, however, I made a mistake and got into the field of view of the cameras. Meanwhile, the captain was already thinking about ignoring all reputational risks and waiting for docking with the orbital base. Let them look for him there. Listen, why are we sweating? Silent asked. Let's wait for the jump, and then wash the ship? What if he crawls into some crevice where he can't get out? Imagine how it will stink later. This is not to mention the risk that he will be able to climb into the capsule just before the jump. And this is far from a zero probability. Well, the XO had to agree with the captain. Especially since there was a case in his practice when one pretzel got drunk because of unhappy love, caught a bruise, climbed between the bulkheads, and did not send everyone to hell for any persuasion. And when the ship took off, not to lose money to everyone else, he was smeared with a thin layer all over the ship, which took a long time and hard to clean. Although the captain, in the opinion of the executive officer, was still very overly cautious. For a long time or not, Rodriguez was caught in one of the compartments, where no one really looked. He burned down, as I said before the AI. Well, he quickly gave his location to the captain. The people, as soon as they heard about it, rushed to the cache with the whole crew in order to resolve the issue and execute the warrant before docking with the orbital base, where they could send a message with a report to Earth. The captain and the XO are standing in the compartment. Rodriguez had run out of bullets by that time. The rest of the crew are looking in the door behind them, waiting for the denouement. "Hey, listen," Rodriguez said to the captain on his knees, in an ingratiating tone that was completely out of character for him. "What are you really?" "Well, who doesn't? It's nothing, by God." "Well, I wanted to earn extra money over the agreed rate. What's the big deal here?" At this point, something clicked in the XO's head, but not so much, as he continued to hold the fugitive at gunpoint, and the captain holds papers in one hand and a pistol in the other. "I think you already know everything, and you can guess what's written in the warrant," the captain said coldly. "Like, why are you trying to sharpen your teeth with someone like Rodriguez?" and starts pointing the barrel at him. And Rodriguez threw his eyes at the documents in the captain's hand, noticed something there, and his eyes widened like a Morgan dollar, and he screamed, "No, not that!" But the captain had already pulled the trigger and ended the existence of this body with one precise shot between the eyes. Well, it was difficult to miss there. "That's what they all say," the captain said dryly. In general, Rodriguez's body was not sent into space, as it should be according to custom, but stupidly disintegrated, like a god-defying creature. Ah, I forgot to tell you what all the fuss was about. I'm a fool. I keep talking and talking, and the most important thing is that I missed it. Here's the thing that's happened. We all die in a capsule, and we're all reborn in it exactly the way we got into it. It cannot be otherwise. That's the law. That's the technology. But what should I do if a crew member dies outside the capsule? Surprisingly, nothing special. It's just that a certificate of the so-called true, this is, if anything, an unofficial term, death is issued. But needless to say, some people sometimes abuse the capsule when they die for one reason or another, so to speak, in real life. So Rodriguez, who got into the capsule and got out of it, are different people. Therefore, people like Rodriguez are not welcome even among our community. They are believed to have no soul, like golems and all that. How do people like Rodriguez come about? Well, there have always been unscrupulous dealers who, having obtained a capsule, or even more than one, offered recovery services in the event of a client's death outside the capsule. It was enough to remove the matrix from the body and donate the genetic material, so that if a conditional signal was received, the capsule would work and give out a freshly baked body. For an additional fee, such dealers could offer services to create a legend, as well as to search and collect information about a client until the moment of death outside the capsule, so that he could, if not a complete idiot, and such are very, very common, learn it and, if necessary, try to excuse himself from the authorities. After all, golems don't remember the events between two recoveries. But all this with a pitchfork on the water. By and large, each such golem is on its own. But the thing is, Rodriguez wasn't a golem. The error came out. They are, of course, rare. But they do happen. But at that moment, the captain and the others were convinced that there was a golem in front of them. Then why did he run? I asked Silent once. If he's not a golem, he'd try to explain. I was scared. What? Contraband on board. Forbidden. It's like any kind of smuggling is prohibited, but there is one that is prohibited. He took her to distant stations, but we found out later, during the investigation. He decided that they had found him out and decided to take him under arrest. Although he could have been killed for such a counterattack during his arrest, maybe that's why he went on the run. But he's on a ship. There's nowhere to escape anyway. That's how Freaky panicked, and in a panic you don't assess the circumstances well. Maybe he decided that he could hide until landing and slip away unnoticed, even on an alien planet, and then see how it goes. But in general, if he had surrendered, they would have returned him to Earth without any problems. And it's not a fact that the case would have gone to court, as it turned out. He had a nice hairy paw where he needed it. That's when he screamed because he saw the mark on the warrant that marked the golem, but it was too late. Our captain was a serious guy. In a sense, even a believer. I don't think he would have understood much and listened. To him, golems are like a red rag to a bull. I see. In general, this is a combination of circumstances. You know, there really was a mistake. The employee was distracted, and when he returned to filling out the form, he messed up something and ticked the wrong place without looking. The man was tired, He was working on the second shift, so he made a typo, so to speak. However, it became known later, upon his return, when the investigation began. The scandal was sky high, and the company's management was jumping up and down like pieces of eel in a hot frying pan. But then it turns out that... Yes, it turns out that he was eliminated unfairly. Wait, but then why? Dura lex sed lex, Silent instructed. Maybe he, Rodriguez, was eliminated and unfairly, but it happened outside the capsule, which means he falls under the code. That is, in fact, he died a real death, for real, as the second entry was made in the registry, correct, without any typos or errors. But the captain wasn't punished. I continued to get indignant. No one was punished. What do you want? And why punish him? The captain acted within the code. The captain on board is a king and a god who unites all branches of government and all judicial authorities. There is no other way in deep space. And the employee, he just made a mistake. It happens. He was reprimanded. But he didn't kill either. Later, additional levels of control and foolproof protection were introduced. But God only knows how many such poor devils were sent to the other world because of a common employee error or a system malfunction. And no one will restore them, you know? The law is harsh, but it's the law. Otherwise, our whole life will go to hell. I couldn't think of anything to object to.